O'Reilly. You need parts? O'Reilly Auto Parts has parts. Need them fast? We've got fast. No matter what you need, we have thousands of professional parts people doing their part to make sure you have it. Product availability. Just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 15. Today, we're joined by Jeff Danker of Major League Bowhunter. And in this episode, we're going to dive into how to break down a strategy for hunting mature bucks. I really enjoyed this discussion, and I think you will too. Let's get at it. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. Here with me is my co-host, Dan Johnson, and also our special guest today, Jeff Danker of Major League Bowhunter. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Man, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to chat whitetails with you and see what you've got going on. And, as I mentioned in the intro, you're one of the hosts of the Sportsman Channel TV show, Major League Bowhunter. But for our listeners out there, could you share with us a little more about your background, how you got into whitetail hunting, and maybe what led you to working on Major League Bowhunter and outdoor television?
My deal is it might be different from a lot of people's, is I really never set out to be a host of a television show. I was my dad brought me up coon hunting when I was 4 years old, and I loved the outdoors. And, of course, he got me into hunting whitetails. But then, basically, I was, all we did was rodeo. I mean, we grew up as calf ropers and team ropers, and then my dad had a roofing company, so we learned to work hard. And, man, I was just, as I got older, I was still hunting, and how I got in the hunting industry, old guy called me up in Oklahoma City and said, "Hey, I got this local hunting show. Would you want to go to work for me?" And I was like, "No, I really don't. I'm content where I'm at. I'm rodeoing anytime I want. I'm working for my dad." And long story short, he said, "Well, I tell you what," he said, "I know you're killing some good bucks." He said, "If you would go to work for me, I'd give you a percentage." And he said, "I will pay for all your hunts." I was like, "Well, dang, why didn't you say that from the start?" And so anyway, I met with this guy, and he gave me a camera, and he gave me one of them big old cameras back in the day. I didn't know nothing about it. And he said, "Just point it and shoot," which is absolutely wrong. We all know, but right. I took to the field, and basically we spent $31,000 filming for this little local show, and had 14 kills without knowing what we're doing, and the guy never paid me. Oof. And that's how I got into the hunting industry. I had this footage, and he wanted it, and I was born at night, but it wasn't last night, so I wasn't giving it to him. And that's how I started my first show, Buck Ventures Outdoors, which led to Major League Bowhunter, and my friendship with Chipper Jones and Matt Duff, and we're just now, it's our life, and I haven't set foot in the woods without a video camera over my shoulder since 2003.
Wow. Yeah. So how long before that, you said that this guy had known you were killing some good deer, how long before this kind of trial in the video side of things, how long before that were you starting to kill those good deer?
Well, and really back then, I wouldn't even consider it good deer to me now, but what I'm very fortunate, I grew up right here in Lincoln County, Oklahoma, where we have deer, but big deer are few and far between. And when I started hunting, guys, if you seen a doe, you were shooting a spike, and so I got to hunt those, and I got to even seeing a glimpse of deer. I loved it. And then back in the 90s, I moved out more northwest, or I say moved, I still lived here, but I got grounded northwest up by the Kansas line, and I'll never forget what changed my whole deal, and this was about when he called me, is I shot a deer up there my first time in northwest Oklahoma, and I was proud. It was like 18 inches inside, you know, probably looking back on it, maybe a 3-year-old 120.
Okay.
And I was proud, and I checked it in that morning in the state up there in northwest Oklahoma, and it was the third littlest buck checked in that morning.
Wow.
I mean, there was 160s, 170s, and right then I told myself, you know, and that's when I started learning. That's when I started being able to pass deer. And, you know, we've all read the magazines, we've watched shows like ours, but the experience that I started getting, and kind of where we came up with our slogan, never stop learning, that's where I started to learn, is letting a 120 walk out and watching his behavior, and then the bigger one come later. And that's where it all started. So probably when he called me there, you know, I was shooting maybe some 140s by that time, and we were in Iowa, and I mean, I was hunting public ground. That's wherever I went outside of Oklahoma, I was hunting public ground. I would research. I would find those public areas where there was no big towns or big cities, and I would sneak up there, and I'd find those places in the summer, and that's where I was killing these deer.
Wow. That's awesome. I'd love to dive a little further into that, but before we get into the real meat of things, we do like to kind of throw our guests a curveball, usually here in the beginning, to loosen things a little bit up. So that said, Jeff, I'm curious, what's the most embarrassing song you have on your iPod, phone, or computer?
Oh, my goodness. That would probably be, and oh, man, I hate to even say this, but it is embarrassing. It's Whitney Houston, Emotional. My wife, my wife and me, that was way back in our high school days. She always had that, so she has that. I'm gonna blame it on her. It is on my phone.
Of course. Oh, that's great. Well,
hey, at least it's a good song.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll do the same one then. Dan, what about you? What do you got?
I have Taylor Swift, Teardrops on my guitar.
Ooh,
Oh my goodness.
Taylor Swift. All right.
Don't
my
tell
girls
anybody,
would
guys.
like that.
Don't tell anybody.
I was thinking about this one before we started recording, and I think for me it's not a single song but a whole album. I have the NSYNC Christmas album back from like 1997.
Goodness. Yeah.
Consider this my resignation.
Well, that's embarrassing for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. So from there, we'll try to get back to whitetails before we say anything else worse. But with that out of the way, you know, as we were just talking about Jeff, you know, what I've really enjoyed about Major League Bowhunter is one of the things you just said there, the fact that your motto is never stop learning. And I think you guys do a pretty cool job of breaking down properties and hunts and, you know, showing how your setup is and everything. And that said, I was hoping to kind of look at that way of thinking throughout this episode. And so, you know, to start off, one of the things that I've seen you and Matt and Chipper do a lot in the show is you're hunting new properties, going to some new areas. And I was hoping to kind of hear about how you start that process. So could you talk to us a little bit about how you identify new properties that you're interested in hunting, whether that's maybe back in the day when you were hunting some of those public spots or today? You know, how does that process get started for you?
Well, the first thing with me is I'm not your typical, or maybe I am, but I'm not going to be an outfitter type guy. I'm not. I don't want to be around anyone. I mean, and even breaking it down to me, Chipper, and Duff in camp. I mean, and they'll tell you. And really, I think they're becoming more that way too. As far as I don't want to be on a piece of property with you, Chipper, or Duff. I mean, I want options. I want. And so what we do is the new pieces. I mean, obviously we're looking at the right states and then breaking it down from the states to the right area where there's not only good bucks, but a right area where there's not a lot of people or whatever, whether we're in Nebraska, you know, we're discovering some new stuff there. And then, you know, from there, I truly believe, like in our line where we're leasing or buying at times, is if you're leasing, you've got to have a good relationship and a straightforward relationship with your guy that you're leasing from, because, you know, we're serious. So when we drive 10 hours somewhere, we are expecting there hadn't been one footprint laid on that piece of ground. So that is one of the most important. And even back to my public days of going up there, I mean, I researched it all on the computer, and I found those far places, those big places, and then found those pockets where I didn't think anyone would be. And then that's the way I hunted. I would go hunt all day. I would sneak around. I was that guy that my pickup might be parked over here, and you're thinking I'm hunting here, but I'm 2 miles from where that pickup is.
Wow.
And that's really how we hunt today. I mean, we just, again, just the no pressure is such a big deal. I mean, a 170-inch deer is no harder to kill than a 140 if he's not pressured. I mean, you got to have him, and then you got to keep him not pressured.
Definitely. So you mentioned that you did some leasing. Are you doing any just by permission property, or is it mostly going to be purchasing or getting those leases?
Well, you know, we get all kinds of requests for, you know, people when they find out we're going to go hunt somewhere. So we have a lot of people that say, man, you can come hunt my farm. And so we have taken a few of those opportunities, and we're real careful in making sure that, again, that it's legit, it's a deal. I mean, I always tell people this. I mean, I always say, listen, I'm a big old baby. I tell them that straight up. I don't hunt after no one. You know, I'll come in, we'll set the place up, and then as soon as I'm done hunting and kill my deer, I will leave all my tree stands for you. So that's where we're careful. But we, you know, I did that in Iowa last year. I went to 240 acres in Iowa, and a guy said, I'll let you hunt. And I told him my deal, and he said, okay, we won't step foot on it. Here's a house you can stay on. And I went up in the summer, actually me, Chipper, and my brother and a couple others, and we filmed the whole deal, which will air this year. And, you know, it was different for me. It was terrain. It was big terrain. It was over in Unit 5. And
okay, yep.
So it was not mountains, of course, but, you know, big old ridges. And that was a different kind of way of hunting for me. And it wasn't, I guess, in my little honey hole type hunting. And anyway, we spent 6 days there, and we shot a really nice deer, 155-inch deer. And you know, I ended up just signing my bow and giving it to the guy, and I got a friend for life out of it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So I guess now, let's say in that type of situation, let's say you found this spot, whether it be that one in Iowa or, you know, maybe you're looking in Nebraska. You've picked out a property that you're going to hunt. How do you start that process of scouting? Is that something you're doing, you know, all through the summer, or do you, since you're hunting in a number of different places, are you doing your scouting and prep maybe right before the hunt? You know, what does that look like for you?
Well, that deal is the way I break down all my stuff is I break down my states and I break down my familiar property. So when I'm talking Kansas, Oklahoma, I'm always going after my big deer there because they're close. It's the places I know. And then Iowa is another one. It's a place now that I know more. But so I got about 3 or 4 that I'm going after big deer because I'm running all these trail cameras. And then there's a few other ones, like, you know, obviously when I go to Alberta or North Dakota, you know, that is going to be more getting there a couple of days early, glassing, trying to find those deer, and then hanging on the fly. And you know, so there's several of those, but it kind of goes both ways. I mean, we're going to leave out here next Monday, and we'll probably be gone 7 days. We're going to Oklahoma. We're, you know, running our trail cameras, putting up our trail cameras in Kansas. Then we're going to Iowa. Then we're actually going to a brand new piece in Ohio that I'm hoping will fit into that same mix of that being kind of our home and going after those big deer. I always tell people, and I've learned this, is you set your goals based on what you have. I mean, you know, Kansas, I know all the deer, as long as they've made it, the deer that I found the sheds to that are going to be there. Oklahoma, same way. But when I go to Alberta, I'm not going to put a number on the deer that I'm going to shoot before I leave. I'm going to get there. We're going to scout a couple of days, and I do set a goal from there. But I don't set my goal too early on those kind of places. Now, Oklahoma, I'll tell you, I probably won't shoot nothing this year because of the kind of deer I have on it, unless he's, you know, 165-inch deer.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
With all that travel that you guys are doing, how do you spend your time? I mean, if you know, let's say there's a nocturnal buck in Iowa, and but he's big enough to keep you staying, as opposed to, you've traveled all the way out even to Ohio or North Dakota, or even Alberta. Those are longer trips, and it starts to get slow. Are you guys pretty aggressive, and make some aggressive moves, or do you just pack up and head out to the next day?
That's a great point, because everybody always, and what you see on the show a lot of times is we're always making decisions on what stand to go to, what wind to play, or whatever. But some of the most important decisions we'll make all year are just what you're talking about. So I have one hunt booked that I have to be there. I know I'm going to be there September 2nd to September 13th, and that's Alberta, Canada. So every one of them other ones, guys, if it starts to get slow and I'm seeing the weather's cold in Kentucky, I'm leaving. I think that's a lot of a gut deal. Now, I've gotten stuck in places before, but mainly we're not set to be nowhere. We're not the like Michael Waddell. His hunts are booked right now. He knows where he's going to be. Well, we're not that way. We're, obviously, I'm going to try to be when I get back from Alberta, I'm going to try to be in Kansas the day it opens, September 17th, because I got a really big deer there. But if I go along there and it ain't happening and I can't see that it's going to, we're going to either bail and go to a different place, or, I got 2 little girls at home. I'm going to spend every ounce at my house with my girls when it's no good. I'm not just going to bang my head against the wall. So, and that's how we all are. We're not that typical TV show that's got all these bookings and we have to be there. And the big thing there too is we lease or own pretty much every piece of ground, other than we have an Iowa and a Kentucky where people let us hunt. But other than that, we can go anywhere we want just based on our gut and the weather.
That's a nice situation to be in, for sure.
Yeah.
So how many states this year? I think you've mentioned a handful, but I'm not sure if it was last year or this year. How many states do you think that you will be hunting this year?
Well, me and Chipper and Duff, we sit down every year and we tell ourselves that we need 10 possibilities apiece with this bow and arrow, because if you can go out and kill 3 to 4 mature bucks with your bow every year, you're having a great year. So we have 10 possibilities apiece. This year mine include Alberta, 2 in Nebraska, 2 in Oklahoma, 1 in Kansas, 1 in Missouri, 1 in Ohio, and then I'm putting in for governor's tag in Iowa. And then we have what we call our lean-to places. We have a really nice place in Arkansas that Duff hunted last year. And so we'll possibly be there. We're also going to hunt with, Squincher in Mississippi, December 9th, which is when the rut starts there. So there's about my 10 possibilities.
Nice. Sounds like a pretty fun possibilities for fall.
Yeah, right.
Definitely. So taking a step back to, once you're breaking down these spots, whichever one of these different states you're hunting, let's say you're there, how are you using trail cameras at that point to, figure out your hunting strategy for the week or the few days that you're there?
So when I get to a place?
Yeah.
Well, the biggest thing with trail cameras to me is they are the most revolutionary type tool that we have today. But I'm as guilty as anyone in the past. You've got to be so careful of going in and out with them and getting them. So right now what we'll do is we'll put out all these trail cameras on what we call our home places that I've mentioned. And they're just inventory cameras. They're not in that good-looking place where you want to hang a stand. They're in big bulk feeders, and so we're just checking the inventory. So to allow us to know what's there, what's really blew up, and then from there, when I get to a place, it's all going to matter at the time. If I get to a place and it's early, then I'm still going to be so careful. If I take one in that is close to one of my sets, I'm still going to be doing inventory type deals. But if it's rut, then I'm going to be more aggressive. I'm still going to go check that camera with the right wind, but I'm going to be more aggressive. I'm going to take it in and what we call kind of like speed scouting during the day, and I can get by with more. That buck's not so sensitive And so we're still using the trail cameras then, but the biggest thing, I am real careful with the trail cameras. They help us tremendously, but if you're in and out of your honey hole spots, big boy's gonna get onto you really fast.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those catch-22s. Like you said, so many people get overexcited about them and want to check them all the time or aren't careful. So yeah, that's something you definitely have to think about.
Right.
And one other thing I'm curious about: how often, typically, are you checking those cameras? And is there a certain area that you'll never go into to push a camera into? Are you always keeping them outside of a bedding area, or will you ever, like you mentioned, get more aggressive and push them into different spots?
Right. Well, and yeah, I mean, obviously the year and the time, but like September, I truly believe that you only get 1 to 2 mistakes with big deer. I mean, I'll just bring up Kansas. Kansas, I shot a buck we call Huckleberry that most people have seen by now, 183 and 5/8 inch deer. Wow. I'd never seen the deer in my life. But what I did with him is I put several trail cameras. I was hunting a 250-acre farm there on the Arkansas River, and I put up 5 trail cameras, one of them over a 1,200-pound boss buck feeder that was on the way to some soybeans. And I ended up getting several pictures of him in August, and in September there was wrong winds to check 4 of those cameras, but I could only check one with the right wind, and I was really waiting on windy days because he wasn't, in my mind, wasn't bedded too far from there, and ended up checking this camera, and he had moved to this camera, and he was coming through there going to soybeans, and just so happened that I had a back door into this place to hunt him with a hot south wind, and end up killing him off of that trail camera. I mean, I truly give it up to the Moultrie for that, because I had in my mind he was in a different place, and I was hunting him with the right winds, but in a different place, and he was just a no-show. And anyway, so that night I killed him. I actually laid my eyes on him for, I think, 54 seconds is all I ever saw that deer on the hoof, but I have 350 pictures of him. So, being real careful in September, going into your aggressive state of mind, absolutely, man. When it gets November 1st and that air changes, if I need to go in somewhere and hang something on a scrape or wherever it might be, I'm going to do it. I'm still using my head, but like I said, that time of year, if you bump a doe or whatever it might be, deer are used to running deer. They're used to even snorts, and so I'm way more aggressive when that hits.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's pretty well in line, with what me and Dan have been doing too. What are your thoughts on all this, Dan?
I myself am I I don't have enough stands for all my hunting locations. And I know that our listeners love the details about what a person is doing. On your run and gun setups where you come to a property, are all your stand locations already trimmed out by the time the season starts, or are you running and gunning? Are you cutting shooting lanes? What kind of tree stands are you using? That kind of stuff.
Well, I'm the same way as you, Dan. I'm not. I don't have everything trimmed. I mean, you know how that is. Yeah. Things change anyway. So, you know, if we're running and gunning, I mean, I'm cutting those limbs just like anyone else and being as careful and as quiet. And, you know, the one thing I'll say, I never go in morning or evening. It's always going to be in the middle of the day with the best possible wind I can get. You know, whether it's raining or whatever is always a good time. But I'm trimming those limbs and you know, and I'll just tell you, a lot of times what I do these days is instead of going in the typical way we used to do it, is you'd go in going, oh, I'm going to go hang a set there. We're going to back out of there and give it a day or two and then come back in and set it. I'm glassing that tree that I want to be in. I'm looking at the map, and then I'm going in to hang that set and hunt it. So whether it's packing a stand, me and my camera guys, you know, Summit, we use the Summit Hawks most of the time, and but we're hanging and hunting, and I just can't stress enough the amount of success you can have by that, because by the time a big buck gets there and he's not put it all together with his brain, he's getting there. Now you're already in the tree, even if he's picking up some scent that you might have laid down. He's there, and you're there. So you have a percentage to kill him other than you going in, laying a bunch of scent down, and then 2 days later come back. He's already been there. He's put the puzzle all together, and he's spooked. So I do that a lot.
That's good. That sounds a lot like the way myself and Mark hunt as well.
Yeah.
It's all about the power of that first sit. It's pretty incredible.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And that brings up another question. How often or how many times will you hunt a stand before you get to the point where you figure it's worn out? Or will you, if you find a spot that you think's the spot, will you just hunt that for the rest of your time in that area? You know, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, that goes a lot of things. I mean, you know, a lot of it, man, I truly believe in a gut feeling, but my sets, I mean, I have sets that are called observation sets. I have stands that I call bulletproof sets. I mean, if I'm in one of my bulletproof sets, which is basically like the set I described in Kansas, where I can slip in, I cross a river and I went through an open field to get there, and I crossed this river, and then 20 yards on the other side of this river is this stand. I can hunt that stand as many times as I want with the right wind. I mean, it truly is. You don't spook nothing getting in. You don't spook nothing going out. So as long as I got that right wind, I'm good to go. So, and, you know, there's others that, like I said, I think I go on gut a lot. I mean, I'm studying a map just like I'm sure you guys do, especially when you get into that state of confusion. You know, I know for the listeners, you know, everybody gets jacked up. You're ready to go hunt, and then, boy, all of a sudden you're in the hunt 3 days, and all this daydreaming that you've done over the last month ain't happening. So it creates this state of confusion for all of us hunters. And that's where guys just got to go back to the map, got to keep that positive attitude. And, you know, you just put your best foot forward. And when I say that, always have the wind. I truly believe if a hunter follows the wind, I mean, if a guy's got 40 acres and he's got a stand for east, west, north, south on each side of it, and you might have, we all got that favorite set, but if you let that wind dictate where you're going to go, that wind will kill big bucks for you. No matter, the sign might not be in that place as it is in your little honey hole stand, but those right winds get it done for you. And so that's what I'm always breaking it down to is, you know, I might have, you know, 20 sets hung on a place, and then it breaks down to these 3 are good for this wind, and then just going with my gut. And I think as hunters, you know, that's what we're all going to have to do to some point.
Yes, you bring up something that I think is worth diving into a little bit more, just being, you know, playing the wind. And there seem to be a lot of different ways that people look at this. You know, some folks are just trying to make sure the wind won't get them caught by a deer. Some people are trying to think more so, how is the deer using the wind? How do you look at that? Are you focused on a combination of the two or one or the other? How does that go through your head?
Well, my deal is, a lot of people ask me different stuff about this, and I just think as the hunter that's hunting, he has to have a plan. So many people, they could tell you where they're going to hunt right now, guys, opening day. And that's not a good plan. I mean, you've got to have a plan broken down of, okay, mornings, this is where I think the deer are. Evenings, this is where I think the deer are. So you have to have this inside your head, in my opinion. And then my deal is, my goal and objective every time I hunt is to not spook one deer. None. So I'm definitely looking at, as I walk in, making sure I'm not flooding any bedding area. I'm making sure when I walk out that night that I have a good access point to get out. One thing we talk a lot about on all the properties that we get to view is, you'll be scouting a property, say March, and all the signs lay down, and you look up and there's that perfect tree that has a perfect place for two stands. It's just awesome. But that's not the most important thing in our mind. It's the access. So we start with access. Yeah, we find those honey hole places, but that place might be a little too deep or whatever. So, really looking at it from a whole, not to ruin a farm, not to step on a 180 or 190 class deer that you're hunting, or it's a 140, whatever it might be. That mature buck is being so careful. But my key here is the plan. If a guy goes in not thinking, he's got to come up with his own plan. People ask me, well, how do you know where all them deer are bedding? Well, I don't know where every deer on the place is, but I put in my brain where I think they're going to a destination field that night, how they're getting back there, and where they're laying, and I base my wind off of that. Now, I went into stands before with that plan, and all of a sudden the deer coming out in a different place, and I get busted, and, obviously never stop learning comes into play there. I learn from that, and then change.
To elaborate on that a little bit, what kind of hunting areas, I guess you would say, do you find yourself in the most? Like pinch points, field edges, or like food plot edges, hunting sign, or travel areas, bedding areas?
Well, my deal might be different than some others. Is, obviously in the rut, I'm going to be your typical guy. I'm going to be your typical in a pinch or a funnel, a travel area with a great wind. That's my philosophy during the rut. I'm going to spend as much time. My philosophy during the rut is get a good wind, get in a high travel deal, and set all day, as many days, and you will have success doing that. But where I concentrate on killing my biggest deer is never during the rut. The rut is something we all get hyped up about, but it's the most unpredictable time of the year. So I'm trying to kill my big deer in September and early October and even late December. So I'm very careful those times of years, or that time of year. But my number one tree is what I call an observation tree. It's the tree that you can see a long ways. It's the tree that you're probably not going to kill a deer out of, but I spend more of my time in those trees, and I might spend 3 or 4 days in those trees, and then when I move, it's because I've seen him or whatever, and I'm going in to kill him. So I end up in all kinds of different situations, but those observation trees have been really good to me over the years, and not just moving in to kill, but then you take that observation tree in the rut to see what's going on, and you're calling in deer and killing them. I mean, I've killed 2 booners out of an observation stand that I ended up late October with one of them, early November the other one, and called into a decoy on both times, and used that observation tree. I wasn't where per se you would want to be, but I was in a safe tree where I had a great wind, great access, so where I could see, and I called him to me.
That brings up something that when it comes to hunting new properties and maybe needing to be a little more aggressive, the idea of decoying to kind of push the issue. Would love to hear a little bit more details about exactly how it is you use a decoy, what your strategy is around that.
Well, my decoying is, first of all, I started decoying because I love the footage. The decoy got me into more trouble in my hunting career than any other piece of equipment. I mean, you know, we all love that deer coming in sideways, licking his lips, hair blown out. And so my biggest deal to anybody, from my experience, is be careful when you use it. I mean, you know, basically pre-rut, when the bucks are by themselves, is a great time. But you just have to be careful that they're not still bastard up. And the way I use them, you know, everybody sees it, turn back to the hunter. They walk out there 25 yards, and they point it back to the tree with the ears back. And I absolutely disagree with that 100%. The way I've killed all my bucks is I take the decoy, and again, my big theme, anybody that talks to me, I'm real careful. I don't want to spook nothing. So I take the decoy 5 to 7 yards from the bottom of my tree, and I face it away from me, and I touch the back legs only, and I only stake the back legs. I never put a footprint. I'm very, very careful, but that way I don't have to walk out there and put more scent down. A great way, one of the booners I shot was I had a fence line that was on the other side of my tree where I wanted to shoot the deer. But I walked up that fence line, which is about 5 to 7 yards from the bottom of my tree. I reached over with the decoy, and I do this every year. I've killed lots of bucks this way, but I stay on my side of the fence, and then I stake his back legs down right on the other side of the fence and put his ears back and then climb in that tree. And again, it's a barrier that they can't get my scent because, you know, you guys have used them, you know that you don't always get that shooter, and then you get that curious buck stomping around, and that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah, that's definitely the curse of decoys is when that happens.
Yes.
Well, that's awesome. That's a pretty interesting idea that goes, like you said, counter to what a lot of people says, but it makes a lot of sense. So.
Well, and the other big thing I just want to touch on, because I think it's the most important part of decoying, is there's a time, and you guys know the time, when all of a sudden the deer are disappeared. It usually happens around November 7th through somewhere around 15th, where the does, the button bucks, everything have been harassed so much because every buck in the woods is, you know, looking for a girlfriend. So that's when them does go into hiding, and they're just belly down and trying not to even be visible for anything to see them. Well, that is the best time to decoy, because then you're not having to deal with the old doe that's blowing at your decoy for 40 minutes because they're all hidden away. And that's when you can get by with being on the cornfield or the bean field, and you won't have to deal with a lot of does looking at your decoy.
That's a great point. That's something to look for sure.
Yeah.
So continuing on this theme of breaking down the hunt and taking a little more of a micro look at this, I was interested in maybe taking a look at one of your recent successful hunts and diving deep into that. So Jeff, is there a specific hunt maybe that we could take a look at? And if so, can you share with us, when and where this hunt occurred, and then we'll kind of go from there?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, one that I thought about when y'all mentioned this segment is, last year I was going to talk about my Alberta hunt, and, this is a place that I went the year before and shot a nice buck, but I ended up on a new farm over there this year. So I went to the old farm that I was hunting, and activity just wasn't happening. I was in an observation stand. I had some 130s, but the biggest deer I could find, you're in Alberta. Obviously, your expectations are high. And anyway, we just started driving around one day. We just covered as much ground in the morning as we could to see if we could lay our eyes on a deer. And sure enough, we laid our eyes on two really big deer that was hitting a barley field. And we started a plan of attack as soon as we saw this deer. We started with a plan of attack that was when I look back, it was the wrong plan. But we started with observation stands. We started, and we thought we kind of knew where he was living, but we were absolutely wrong. But that observation stand we hung, it was a safe play. It was, and we ended up watching the buck come out of a big cut block and coming all the way across this CRP, and then hitting the barley, obviously at dark, and then vice versa in the morning. So 3 days into this, moving back and forth to two observation stands, one morning, one evening, the buck was doing the same thing. He would come out of this cut block, and what's really interesting about this deer is when he come out of the cut block, it was short grass, and he would run all the way across. He had hit 4-foot CRP, and he'd slow down and ease his way all the way to Barley. And just that to me is amazing, watching a 5-year-old deer, just the smartness of him versus those 2-year-olds that were just gandering around.
Oh, yeah.
And so anyway, the next play, we were actually looking to the north out of this set, and he was coming out of the northeast way over there, probably 700 yards. So instead of, I couldn't pinpoint where he was coming out of this cut block. So I told my camera guy, it's like, listen, Brandon, we're going to go in, we're going to set up on the north side of that field. And, it looked like he was probably paralleling this tree row that was on the north side of it, maybe 150 yards. And, my camera guy's like, dude, we ain't going to kill him. I said, no, we ain't going to try to kill him. We're going to go tonight, and we're going to watch him go by us. And when he comes by us, we're going to let him get long gone, and then we're going to pinpoint right where he came out, and we're going to take this stand down. We're going to take a circle inside the woods so we don't put any prints down, and we're going to hang this set. And we had a back door out. So that's exactly what I did. That I went in, and we hung that set. The problem was it all sounds good up to now, but he never showed. We had this whole plan together, and he didn't show. And so my camera guy was getting ready. I'm like, dude, we're staying. I don't care how long it takes. We're sitting here. So I crawled down out of my tree. I got to the bottom of my tree in this tree row. That way I could skyline more. And anyway, an hour and 20 minutes after daylight, I glass him and watch him go across. And so we give him another 30 minutes, and then we pulled that set, had that ear marked right where he came out, and we hung that set in the dark. Got back about midnight that night, and then we slipped in that back door and got in that tree. And you guys, I'm sure you've hung sets at dark. So you always hang that set at dark, and you wake up the next morning in it, and it's not what you thought, or you've got to trim this limb in the dark.
So true.
Well, this was the one time, guys, no joke, when it broke daylight, I was like, oh my gosh, we couldn't have hung it any better in the summertime. And anyway, long story short, the buck that I was hunting didn't come, but a bigger deer came right down that same deal, coming back from that Barley, and I get the deer shot at 15 steps. That's actually the episode that aired last Friday night. But anyway, that scenario was it's just the perfect plan of attack for especially early and really late season hunting, that where you're patterning those deer.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver, off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like it was a heck of a plan, and how you were able to adapt and adjust. Oh, that's pretty interesting. What do you think about that, Dan?
I love how there's that's being aggressive, and I love it because that's the way that I hunt as well. In 2012, the buck that I shot, I think within maybe a 40 or 20 or 40 or 30 kind of square area, a 30 or 40 acre area, I probably changed tree stands maybe maybe 10 times in that small amount, and maybe, like maybe even a 7-day period. And I finally got the buck, but what people don't realize is you got to make the move if you want to kill a deer. You sit in the same tree stand for 7 days in a row, and you keep watching deer go by you in a different area. If you're not moving, it's your own fault.
Yes, exactly right. Well, I think, guys, that's how we all grew up. I mean, I remember I grew up, and my dad and them, they always said, man, just put your time in, just stay there. And they didn't play the wind back then. They just went to this tree. And really everyone I grew up around, that's the way they did. They all had their tree or their spot, and that's where they camped out. And it was just, if you put your time in, they felt like they were going to kill a deer. Well, to me, hunting has evolved, especially if you're going after a mature buck or you're wanting to kill a bigger deer. You have to adjust. And just like you said, Dan, you have to make it happen. I mean, we call it going in to kill. I mean, a lot of times Chipper and Duff will ask me, they'll say, listen, you going to kill him tonight? I'll be, nope, I'm going in. And that's our lingo in camp is, Chipper will say, no, we're not going to kill tonight, but we're going to learn something, and we could be another step closer tomorrow. And a lot of times that has to do with early season, but it also has a lot to do with rut as well. I mean, you see a big buck that is locked down with a doe or chasing. You can't afford to wait. You got to go. You got to go in for the kill. Now, it doesn't always happen, and you might have to reevaluate the situation, do something different. But more times than not, you have to take those steps.
Right. Now, I got a question that kind of evolves from this, and every hunter at some point fails. They make a mistake, and the deer wins that battle. Right. So how, you guys are all about never-ending learning, or you're always learning. How would you talk to a fellow hunter who has failed several times and needs some kind of advice on how to learn?
Man, that's a tough one. It's, I think it's a mindset. I think it's, I remember when I first started all this, I mean, the whole world's watching. So it put so much pressure on me that it become not fun. And I had to learn, listen, it's not about the kill. It's about the journey doing it. And I think all of us as hunters, we got to realize that, I mean, first and foremost, I'm out there with God's great outdoors. I'm seeing this sunrise and this sunset, and the kill is the bonus. And, I say all that in one deal, but I can be the biggest whiner that you've ever shared camp with. I mean, trust me, because, I mean, I'm serious business. I'm wanting to win this battle, but I truly do know now when I set my goals that I've talked about earlier in the show is, if I'm setting my goal in Oklahoma or I'm setting it in Alberta or Nebraska or wherever it is, I have to prepare myself that I could lose. And so it's just like everyone watches television and they read these magazines, and you can learn so much by that. But every step you take in the woods, every tree stand you hang, every encounter you have or don't have, there's always something to learn. And we really take that to heart these days. I mean, every time I get to watch a deer or a big buck or a doe, I'm trying to learn something and being able to, I mean, if people just look at it to write their own articles, we're all learning by articles, we're all learning by television, we're learning by talking to each other and learning from others' mistakes or successes. But you guys know, I mean, the best way to learn is from your own experiences. So I just think that's the way people's mindset could get, and it will make you better. Every time you go, you should take something out of it. And the other thing, I'll say this, is a positive attitude kills big bucks. You know, it truly does. If a guy can stay positive and learning in that way, you're going to have better results.
Yeah, it's such a huge deal too that it's hard to quantify, and it's hard to you can't always wrap your head around it or explain to someone how to do it, but I think it changes everything about how you're hunting. Even, you know, you might be in the same tree stand, but if one day you're totally down the dumps, maybe you're not paying attention as much, maybe you're not as focused, you know, that can end up, you know, causing you to miss that opportunity, right. Which if you had the right attitude and you were prepared for success, you can capitalize on it. Yeah. So,
well, I mean, it don't matter who you are. If you're Bill Jordan or you're just starting out hunting, you can still learn a lot. It don't matter who you are. There's a lot to learn, and to me, man, I tell you, those kills and everything, they're rewarding. But the game with the best animal in the world to hunt it's what it is. You're playing a game. Enjoy it. You know, go head to head with him. You're going to lose a lot of times, but that is what is so exciting about it. Is these are the smartest animals that walk the earth, in my opinion. I mean, as far as try to go kill them consistently, and especially when you start talking about big whitetails, doing it on a consistent basis, it ain't easy. You're going to lose. You got to be prepared. I'm going to lose several times this year. I mean, you know, you guys know. I mean, any TV guy or anybody that's getting viewed from the public is yeah, you're seeing its successes, and we ain't got time to show you all them times when bad things happen.
Right. There's always a lot more that goes on that's on the editing table, right?
Right, exactly.
So you said something that I liked, and you said there's always a lesson to be learned from each hunt. And so from that one hunt, the example you gave us just a few minutes ago, you know, what do you think was the main lesson that you learned from that successful hunt? And then, you know, what do you think would be the greatest thing that our listeners could take from that one example as well?
Well, to me on that, what I learned from that is it kind of goes on what we was just talking about. When my farm, you know, I traveled 2,000 miles or whatever it is to get to where we were at. And when my farm that was so good the year before, the daydreams went out the window because there was not a mature buck in that area coming to these fields. And so I'd spent 3 days there, and I got down. I got to whining, and I got to, you know, like, golly. But I rebounded, and I said, okay, we're going to put together a plan. And my lesson here to myself was, dude, it never happens the way you daydream it. You've got to adjust. So we did. We got in a pickup, and we drove around. And then from there is I think when I look at that situation, if I just take a regular guy, and when I say that, say one of my buddies that just hunts every now and then, loves to hunt but just goes and hunts, he would have dove into this farm and he would have spooked these deer before he even had a chance to hunt them. And so again, I chose to tiptoe in it, hunt from the outside in, and that was what allowed me to see these deer, and they had no idea I was hunting them. And to me, that is the key, is kill a deer without him knowing you've ever been there. And that's what we did. And so those two lessons to me, you know, it may be as old as whatever, but those are just the carefulness of what it takes to shoot these big bucks. And you know, the thing about it is I learn every year, but then we go through an off season. We go through what everybody else does, back to life and doing our thing. So when you first start hunting again, that's probably when I make my biggest mistakes of the year, because I'm not polished. I ain't got, you know, I might not have everything in my bag that I needed or whatever it might be. And that's when I can make those mistakes. And last year we were patient enough, but aggressive enough at the same time, and got a 165-inch deer on the ground.
That is awesome. A lot of words of wisdom there. This is great. I think, though, that we are coming up on time here. So that said, Dan, is there anything else you would like to add before we close things up?
No, just as far as, you know, I never used to watch any hunting shows or anything like that. And what I really like about these guys and what they're doing with Major League Bowhunter is, it is, you know, yeah, they got to pay their bills. They got to do their commercials and whatnot. But they also are trying to educate other hunters on how to be successful when a lot of other TV shows don't do that. And that's one big thing that I like.
Well, I really appreciate you guys saying that. I appreciate the time that y'all have given me. I look at this, what I get to do is a privilege and a platform that God's given me. I look back on when Major League Bowhunter started, and something a lot of people may not know, and probably y'all don't even know, is when we came out with the name Major League Bowhunter. You can look back on the forums, and we got hammered. We got hammered by people saying, "Oh man, it's just a bunch of rich baseball players fixing to start another show," and we couldn't really scream and tell them that's not what it was. But our goal was to be able not to say we're Major League Bowhunters, because we're not that. We're trying to become that, and we wanted to share every experience. And not only that, before Major League Bowhunter, you very seldom saw people looking people in the eye. And so that's the other big thing we did, is say, you know what, we ain't going to set our interview chair where we're not looking at the camera. We're going to look these people in the eye, and we're not going to have cue cards. We're going to look you and speak from our hearts. And I think that is the connection that we've had, because we're all hunters. We're all in this together, and we're going to stay humble, and we're going to do what we love. Now, we're not going to apologize for having good ground or working our tails end off to have good ground, but like I said, I think that was the big difference for us.
Yeah, I think it's paid off too. It really, you guys have one of the best shows out there. I've really enjoyed it and learned a lot from what you guys do. And like I mentioned earlier, and Dan did too, it's refreshing to see the focus on the educational aspect. I think you guys do a better job than probably anyone of diagramming it out and really making it visual for people to wrap their heads around. So I love it. And
that means a lot coming from you guys. I appreciate your show, and hopefully y'all have me back on sometime.
We'd love to. And if our listeners want to learn more about Major League Bowhunter, where should they go? Maybe online, and then when can they catch it on TV?
Well, it's obviously we would love for you to everybody follow us on Facebook. Our website is got some cool stuff on there. Obviously, that's where you can buy a lot of the apparel. And then our big air time is every Tuesday night. I think we're 7:30 Eastern and 9:30 Eastern. We have that's the Realtree hunting block and hunting camp block. So that's our two big air times. We air tonight, which I don't know exactly when this airs, but and then I just like to take the time to thank all of our fans and to thank anyone that listened today, and just remember the motto: never stop learning.
That's awesome, Jeff. Well, we will include links and all the information that you just talked about there so that people can check it out. Be sure to catch the show, and that's on the Sportsman Channel, correct?
Yes, that's on the Sportsman Channel.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. This has really been interesting. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Appreciate it. Well, I thought that was pretty great, and hope you did too. And that will wrap things up for us here today on the Wired to Hunt podcast. So thank you so much for joining us. As always, if you enjoyed the show today, we would really appreciate it if you could leave a rating or review on iTunes. And even if you didn't enjoy it, we'd still love to hear your feedback. Thank you in advance for taking the time to do that. Speaking of thanks, we'd also like to thank our excellent partners who help make this show possible. So big thanks to Sitka Gear, Bushnell Optics, Trophy Ridge, Bear Archery, Redneck Blinds, Carbon Express Arrows, Lacrosse Boots, Big & J Long Range Attractants, and the Whitetail Institute of North America. That said, be sure to visit wiredtohunt.com/episode 15 to view the show notes from today's episode, and that's where we'll include all the links that we mentioned today. And if you're new, definitely head over to wiredtohunt.com to sign up for our Whitetail Fix newsletter. That's where you're going to get all different updates on what's new and interesting on the blog. So with that all out of the way, thanks again, Wired Hunt Nation. And until next time, have an awesome week. Keep on living the dream, chasing those whitetails. And as always, stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.